Hey everybody, welcome to the show, Around the Nation, right here to EST Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. Welcome to the show. Got a great show for you guys today. So we'll go through some of the important topics. Obviously, we'll be talking about Donald Trump, new poll. Now, look, we know his poll numbers have been disastrous. But what's even more disastrous is that his base is actually starting to turn on him. It's starting to eat into his actual base of support. Interesting. On the same vein, we've got a very prominent member of the Silicon Valley community that is also a very prominent Trump supporter, starting to turn his back, starting to distance himself on Trump, at least in private. We've got that story. That's awesome. Then we've got a Republican senator on healthcare. Very interesting turn of phrase that he's got on that. Then we've got Joe Manchin, of course, talking about being primaried. Seems like we got a little bit of a badass on our hands in Joe Manchin. I'm kidding, of course. But we'll get to see his quotes. So I'll show that to you. And then we've got the PC police now censoring climate change. Here we go. It has begun. The crackdown on even having a government agency mention the words climate change. So there's that. There's your breakdown of what we're going to talk about today. So before I get into that, I want to thank the patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. Let's see. Let's go to the patrons. Who haven't I thanked yet? I'm just going to go random here and start out with Robo Go Robo. Pretty sure that's not your real name, but nonetheless, thank you anyway. And then you're in Greyjoy. Also, guessing that's not your real name, but hey, awesome. You better let Yara go in the next episode. I'm just saying. Spoilers. Anybody who's watched Game of Thrones should be prepared for spoilers. Okay, we got some more. Of course, we've got some real people. Andrew Walsh, Michael O'Rourke, Kim Hightower, Bava Ravi, Stephanie Compton, Jody, Rende Durham, Rob Hughes, Kenneth Verland, Emily Karp, Barbara Beach Moody, Matthew Fortana, Dan Snowden, Simia Canis, Harold Honeywell, and just Marshall. So thank you to all you who support us on Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation. You are what allow me to actually do the show. So thank you. All right. So let's get into the stories. Let's make fun of Donald Trump. All right. Disaster. All right. Now, President Trump is not doing so well. According to a new CNN poll marking his 200th day in office, God help us that he's lasted this long, a majority of Americans now think that Donald Trump, President Trump, is an abysmal failure as president. Sad. I wonder why that is. Could that be the absolute failure of Trump care? The lack of any legislative accomplishment, or the fact that he's taken more vacation time than President Barack Obama did. And look, he took more vacation time in his first 200 days than Obama did in his entire first term. So, I don't know. Maybe. Let's break down the numbers. According to the poll, 59% of Americans believe Donald Trump's presidency has so far been an absolute fucking failure. That is almost 2/3 of the country, a little more than half, calling Donald Trump a failed president already. So let's look into why. Now, just 43% of respondents say that Trump can bring the kind of change that the country needs. That is down from 48% in April, and the share of those who say he can manage the government effectively now stands at a paltry 39%. That is down from 44% back in April. Now look, Donald Trump, he ran as a change maker. Now, he promised to drain the swamp. Well, what did he do instead? Well, he built a bigger swamp and invited all the swamp monsters, people like Stephen Miller, Gary Cohn, Stephen Bannon, and a whole bunch of other Goldman Sachs guys. Yeah, Donald Trump, he loves holding them Goldman Sachs, man. I'm not going to say anything more on that. He's got the richest cabinet in history. That's not draining the swamp. And look, it's because, well, I don't like hiring poor people. I don't want to hire poor people into these positions. These positions are really, really important. I wouldn't want a poor person to do it. Look at the disdain, man. He can't stand you. He hates you. If you're poor and support Donald Trump, you're completely ignorant. You have no idea. He hates you. Hates you. He doesn't think you're qualified to be in government, for one. And he doesn't even, he doesn't want you on the golf course, even. He thinks golf is a rich person's game. Come on. So, as for running the government, he's shown that he's incredibly inept and unqualified. He's incompetent. He gets bored during policy meetings, can't read more than a page of briefings. It's got to be down to a half a page, filled with cool graphics and maps. In fact, when they were getting him ready for his European trip, they had to give him his talking points in tweet length size. I mean, well, look, he can pay attention to tweets, right? So we'll just put all these policy points, stuff that he needs to know for his trip, into tweet lengths, into 140 characters. Let's spoon feed it to him one tweet at a time. Look, how can you get the complexities of, for example, international trade in 140 characters or less? Come on, man. Look, these are not liberals saying this. This is not speculation. This is coming from inside the White House. Insiders, okay? People who work for him. And that's not even the worst of it. Now, his aides have also had to put his name throughout certain briefings in order to just keep him interested. Ooh, it's talking about me. Ooh. Guy's a child. He's a baby. And he can hardly put his pants on in the morning, much less run the actual federal government. I've got more disastrous numbers. On every other metric, excluding national security and the economy, Trump is in the toilet. On healthcare policy, he has got a 62% disapproval. Foreign affairs, 61% disapproval. Immigration, 55%. Helping the middle class, 54%. That's disapproval. Disapproval. Nearly half, 48%, disapprove of his handling on taxes, while just 34% approve. Now, I said he does better on foreign policy and the economy, right? Well, again, he fares only slightly better. 48% approve to 47% disapprove on his national security. And Americans are also divided on his handling of the economy, which is 47% disapprove to 45% approve. These are terrible poll numbers. More. 62% have less confidence in Trump now than when he took office. Now, so basically, when he gets into office, he takes whatever political capital he has and just shits on it. It's gone. And look, he didn't have a ton when he came into office, not a ton of goodwill. Now, it's absolutely gone, and 2/3 of the country has absolutely no confidence in him. Now, one of the reasons that this poll is so disastrous is, look, he already lost most of the country, right? He was super unpopular the day that he came into office. But now he's even losing some of his base of support. Strong approval among Republicans has dropped from 73% in February to only about 59% now. Sad. Now, there's another poll from IBD TIPP poll. It shows, again, he is losing bigly with the base. According to them, Trump lost the most support from those with household incomes between $30,000 and $50,000. Among this group, Trump's approval ratings dropped from 40% in July to just 27% in August. But what about white men? White men, who are the only group that overwhelmingly approved of Donald Trump, everybody else disapproves, dropped from 51% in July to 44% in August. Even white guys are like, not interested. He's not doing what he says he's going to do, or that he said he was going to do. The August poll also found that just 33% of respondents give Trump high marks for his handling of immigration, and just 34% do so for his handling of the economy. Both are down from last month. And that same poll, again, that's from IBD-TIPP, found that 51% now say the economy is improving, compared with 47% who said so in July. Now, that's interesting. The economy is getting better. A lot more people are happy with the way the economy is going. Shouldn't that actually reflect on Donald Trump or any of his policies? Well, as IBD noted previously, Trump's approval ratings are unusually low given the current economic environment. Despite Americans' optimism regarding the economy, according to the poll, multiple factors are collectively offsetting the boost that the economy should be giving Trump and driving down his approval rating. Sad. Now back to the CNN poll. Just 30% say they admire Trump, and 34% say they're proud to have him as president, while a majority, 55%, say he's lowered the stature of the office of the presidency. Now, why is that? Well, let's go to some of the things that he does as president. Well, number one, tweeting, right? Now, and 7 in 10 actually agree that the president's assessment, or with the president's assessment, that Twitter allows him to communicate with his supporters without this media filter. Now, that's actually true. I agree with that. That's factual. Yes, you can directly tweet out to your supporters. And so that's not really like a negative or a positive. It all really depends on how you use it. Now, how has Trump used it? Pretty negatively, I think, not just in my opinion, but in his own supporters' opinion. Now, a majority, 52%, say his tweets are not an effective way for him to share his viewpoints on important issues. And 72% say they do not send the right message to other world leaders. So you've got a majority of people like, yeah, of course, this is a great way to reach your supporters. Except that you're not using it the way that we would like you to use it. What you're doing is that you're not actually talking about your policies, what you would do. No, in fact, most of the people said that, and this is 7 in 10, so 70%, say that his tweets are too often in response to TV news that the president has seen. That's it. 71% say they're a risky way for a president to communicate. 6 in 10 say that they're very easy to misunderstand. And 63% said that they too often turn out to be misleading. Now, look, all of this basically points to the fact that Trump, all he cares about is his image. All he cares about is his brand. There's another part of the poll where very few people, probably somewhere around a quarter of respondents, actually trust what's coming out of the White House. They have no trust in the White House, no trust in the president, and no confidence. And the problem starts directly at the top. Sad. All right. So let's go to another Trump supporter who is, at least publicly, not very happy with the president. Okay. Now, after a string of disastrous polls coming out showing that Donald Trump is starting to lose his base of support, news that another Trump backer is also privately criticizing the president. Now, this happens to be one of Donald Trump's most prominent Silicon Valley supporters, and that is, of course, Peter Thiel. Now, Peter Thiel, in a report from BuzzFeed News, Thiel has supposedly distanced himself from the president in multiple private conversations. Now, publicly, he remains a steadfast supporter. In fact, he told BuzzFeed News that I support President Trump in his ongoing fight. However, there are certain private statements that he's been putting out that show that statement is at least in doubt. So let me give you some example. According to 3 different separate sources and others who subsequently confirmed those accounts, Thiel has made some rather disparaging comments towards the president of the United States for his handling of the administration. Now, Thiel told Trump that he's off to a terrific start at a White House event in June. His previous statements to friends and associates do not reflect that sentiment. So he's telling Trump, oh, you're doing a fantastic job. You're a terrific start. You're doing great. To his friends, it's like, this guy's a disaster. In half a dozen private conversations with friends that were described to BuzzFeed News, dating from spring of 2016 to as recently as May, Thiel, who served on the Presidential Transition Team Executive Committee, has criticized Trump and his administration and developed increasingly pessimistic feelings about the president. Now, one of the sources who talked with BuzzFeed actually spent time with Thiel in private group settings before and after the election at his homes in LA, San Francisco, and Hawaii, engaging in what they called candid discussions of the PayPal co-founder's politics and his backing of Trump in the election. So here's some examples, right? Now, according to two people who were in attendance at an event with friends in January of 2017, Thiel said of Trump's presidency that there is, quote, a 50% chance this whole thing ends in disaster. Disaster. Hey, man, that's like flipping a coin. And look, already, the administration seems to be heading in that direction. In other conversations, he questioned the president's ability to be reelected. Now, that's interesting because recently there was a New York Times report where President Trump and a lot of Republicans, well, at least a lot of Republicans are saying that Trump either might not run in 2020 or he might get primaried in 2020. Now, they had a great story that came out last week where Republicans have begun traveling towards to Iowa and New Hampshire. Now, look, you don't go to Iowa and New Hampshire unless you're actually looking into running. Now, these Republicans are, of course, John Kasich. That shouldn't be a surprise. He's always been against Donald Trump. He's been a vocal critic. He ran against him in the primary and has criticized him ever since. He's like, no, I'm not in favor of Donald Trump. I'm not in favor of his healthcare position. I'm not in favor of a lot of his policy, and especially his rhetoric. So, okay, that makes sense. That's a bit of a no-brainer that he's looking into running. Now, other Republicans is Tom Cotton. You also have Ben Sasse, and even Mike Pence. Wait. Mike Pence? He's the vice president. That's crazy. Now, some Republicans have joked about the fact that Pence, since he's going to all these different political events, is acting more like a second-term vice president, hoping to clear the field, than a number two sworn in months ago. And in interviews with more than 75 Republicans at every level of the party, elected officials, donors, and strategists, they had expressed widespread uncertainty about whether Mr. Trump would even be on the ballot in 2020. And little doubt that others in the party are engaged in what they call barely veiled contingency planning. Now, John McCain, of course, who is a huge vocal Trump critic, said, quote, of these Republicans, they see weakness in this president. Look, it's not a nice business that we're in. Not a nice business indeed. Now, of course, Peter Thiel, through his spokesman, he did not deny the quotes. He didn't deny that he said that. Yeah, of course, I said that this is going to be 50% could end in disaster. So, yeah, that's very, very interesting that he doesn't deny this. He's like, yeah, I absolutely said this. But he also said, the night we won the election, I said President Trump would face an awesomely difficult task. Today, it's clear that resistance to change in Washington, D.C. has been even fiercer than I anticipated. We still need change. Well, that I agree. I support President Trump in his ongoing fight to achieve it. So again, that's his public position, but let's go back to his private position. At least one private conversation during the election, Thiel had admitted that he had no confidence in either candidate. There was, of course, Hillary Clinton, which I had no confidence in, and Donald Trump, which I had no confidence in. So, hey, we agree. He said whoever wins will likely be a one-term president. This is according to a person familiar with the discussion, with Thiel predicting that there would be a major financial catastrophe within the next 4 years. Now, that actually is a fairly good prediction. For example, I did a story a few days ago where, look, I've talked about how we gutted Dodd-Frank, and now that there are risky business loans out there taking the place of risky mortgages, just like the lead up of the 2008 financial crisis. Now, Those risky business loans, by the way, are being bought and then packaged up and then sold at AAA credit ratings. This is stuff that shouldn't have a AAA credit rating. It's getting sold, and look, this is a big money-making scheme going on Wall Street. And just like the mortgage crisis, it's likely to blow up in their face. And by their face, I mean all of our faces. So with that going on, Thiel is likely on the right track. It is coming. Still, he apparently had very low expectations of a Trump administration. He said, quote, "I always have very low expectations, so I'm rarely disappointed," he said of his role in the administration. And now, even with his low expectations and his views on possible failure, BuzzFeed writes, Thiel hasn't completely hidden his disappointment. At an event in May in San Francisco, he was described as one guest who was in attendance as, quote, "annoyed with the first months of Trump's presidency, with little policy being established by the White House." Thiel worried that the next 4 years would be defined by stagnation and stressed the notion that he didn't think Trump would be reelected. In describing the administration, Thiel used one defining word in front of his guests. That word is incompetent. Ding, 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 man. When you have one of your biggest backers telling his friends in private that the president is incompetent and he will likely be a one-term president, that's not a good sign. All right. I'm going to take a quick break here. I'll be back. Make sure to tweet me, hashtag TYTNation. Also, don't forget, there's a super chat. So if you, use the super chat, I will go and I will read your comment on the air when we come back or at the end of the show. So remember, hashtag TYTNation. We'll be back in a minute. All right, we're back in the Run the Nation. I've got some TYT Nation tweets here for you. Adam, hold on. All right. I had him. Here we go. Michael Napin asks, my thoughts on massive corporate investment on TYT. I don't know. I don't know the details of the deal. All I know is that I'm not involved, and I'm probably not going to see a dime. So it's not really as much of my concern. But what I do know about TYT is that they would set certain guidelines, I would think. Editorial freedom, of course. And let's see. Editorial freedom. And yeah, I think that's about it. Oh, and of course, I don't think that they would take investments from places that invest in fossil fuels or non-progressive causes. So that's what I see from that. Because normally, if you have a certain set of values and you actually believe in those values, then you'll take funding from sources that reflect those values. So it's my guess that the companies that are investing in TYT share some of those progressive values. So I don't see Jenkins taking investment or taking money from corporations that are in favor of things like Keystone XL and have funded Keystone XL or any non-progressive causes. So that's what I take there. So editorial freedom and of course, not having invested in non-progressive causes. That's what I think about that. All right. Then Raven Dawnhead asks, Medicare for all or Medicaid for all? UBI $20 an hour or $15 an hour? Well, those are some interesting questions. It would depend on what's in the Medicare for all, because Medicaid's actually more comprehensive. Weirdly enough, they actually have more end of life care, so that's very, very important. Medicare does not cover that. It would depend what's in the Medicare for all versus the Medicaid for all bill. If it were just straight up Medicaid to everybody, well, then I would be more in favor of that than Medicare. However, again, we don't know exactly what the Medicare for all bill really would look like 100%. Because there's a version in the House from John Conyers, 676, and then Bernie Sanders, of course, introducing his very, very soon. And they would have to reconcile that in order to, agree on exactly what that bill would look like. And I don't know quite what's there in order to make that. As far as UBI goes, I'd say at least $15 living wage. So it's got to be enough for someone can actually live on. And 15 is the minimum. All right. So there's that. Keep using the hashtag TYT Nation for that. And let's get back to the show and do some more stories. All right. So this is fun. So let me get back into here. All right. Now, despite the Republican Party's promise to get rid of Obamacare, they have decided that after the disastrous loss, they were going to give up. Sad. Recently, Senator Orrin Hatch used an interesting phrase to describe why the GOP has decided to move on. He said, "We're not going back to health care. We're in tax now." Hatch told Politico on Wednesday in a story published Monday. He said, "As far as I'm concerned, they shot their wad on health care, and that's the way it is. I'm sick of it." Now, look, I'm a child, so I immediately thought of the sexual connotation. Of course. Again, I'm a child. And I'm sure 99% or maybe 95% of people watching probably thought the same way. Now, that, of course, led to Hatch's office having to explain their turn of phrase. He said, as few of you were alive during the Civil War, here's a valuable jargon lesson on wads and the shooting of them. And again, I have to laugh. He said, wad is described by Merriam-Webster as a soft plug used to retain a powder charge or to avoid windage, when especially in a muzzle-loading gun. And again, I have to laugh at the word windage. But look, seriously though, no matter what connotation you use, it's pretty clear that most Republicans are now tired of the healthcare issue. And those that still want to push for it are either in the minority or they have upcoming elections in extremely conservative districts. So they keep having to say, oh, the Obamacare, I'm still going after it. I'm still, vote for me, vote for me. I will actually try to still get rid of Obamacare, even though nobody wants it. Yeah, okay. Now, others are arguing that Republicans should just move on to other agenda items, such as tax reform. Now, this is, of course, from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Now, he said this past weekend that he doesn't like to dwell on situations where we come up a little bit short. Quote, even on the night when we came up one vote short of our dream to repeal and replace Obamacare, here's the first thing I thought about. Feel better. Hillary Clinton could be president, he said during an appearance at a Republican event in Kentucky. So that was this was his dream. And I remember the exact moment where his dream was crushed. And it was awesome. So, now, again, this guy's dream was to kick millions of people off health insurance. What kind of dream is that? Who has this kind of dream? What does that say about Mitch McConnell as a person, as a human being? Doesn't say very much. Now, this guy wants to move on, or these guys, Republicans, want to move on to tax reform. Now, whenever they say tax reform, they're essentially saying, let's cut taxes for wealthy corporations. That's essentially their plan. They want to cut corporate taxes to 15%. That's going to rob the Treasury of billions of dollars that we could use for infrastructure, social programs, education, and investment into America. And what's worse is that some Democrats are actually signaling their willingness to work with them on it, like the Blue Dogs. Oh, they can't wait. Now, and even if the Democrats decide not to, well, the GOP, they don't care if Democrats join them. They want to do the same thing that they tried to do with healthcare, pass it with budget reconciliation. That only needs 51 votes. Now, of course, in order to do budget reconciliation, it doesn't have to. Any plan should not add to the deficit. So, in order to balance that out, again, they use their predictions of dynamic growth, right? So they use fuzzy math on it. Like, oh no, if we cut taxes for corporations, that's going to lead to 3% growth. No, it's not. Look at Kansas. They cut taxes to the bone. And you know what happened? They actually got less money. They collected less in taxes and actually had far less growth. So again, even they're using their dynamic scoring, they would also have to concede, well, look, this is a large tax cut. We are going to see some less revenue. So what we have to do is, I guess we're going to have to cut social programs. We're going to have to cut education. We're going to have to cut food stamps. We're going to have to cut all these different programs in order to make these tax cuts revenue neutral. Again, giant tax cuts for the rich and corporations. For them, giant cuts in welfare programs for you. It's sort of a win-win for Republicans, for conservatives. They hate the idea that we actually try to help care for the poor people. They want to cut Medicaid. In fact, their recent plan tried to cut Medicaid over $700 billion. They want to cut subsidies to people with health insurance plans in order to sabotage the ACA. And so, again, they want to cut Medicare, Social Security, food stamps, all that so they can give their donors billions and billions of dollars in tax cuts, which have been shown not to create jobs. So, look, you create jobs not by cutting corporate taxes for the rich, which are already at a really low level. What they actually pay is far less than 39%. Okay? What you do is you create jobs when you actually have demand. When people with lower or middle incomes, they actually have money to spend. And then they go and spend it. They go spend it at the local store. Rich people, look, I like to bag on rich people a lot. I think that's obvious. But especially when it comes to them wanting to lower their own taxes, right? And now, it's not because I hate rich people. It's not because I want to punish rich people for being successful. I actually celebrate their success. I also don't bag on them because I love taxes. No, I hate paying taxes. Everybody hates paying taxes. But I realize that taxation is necessary for things, stuff, roads, bridges, help for poor people, a military, which, by the way, the military, I think, needs a massive tamp back. You need to decrease that funding so we can actually stop the practice of military adventurism in the Middle East. That's one thing I would agree with Trump on. We need to stop bombing the Middle East and getting into ridiculous wars. Okay? But look, overall, a country needs stuff in order to run, in order to function. And there are certain things that the free market, is not good at. Okay? So there's a reason that you need taxes to fund government programs. And those government programs do stuff that the free market cannot do successfully, like healthcare and education. Now, the free market makes some decent shoes, except for, of course, Nike, that got caught, using what's pretty close to considered slave labor in order to make some of their shoes, which were made with cheap material, cheap labor, and ended up falling apart 3 months later. after you get a pair. Yeah, okay, so, but look, you see my point, right? Now, Republicans like Orrin Hatch, well, they don't want the government in healthcare because it means that the donors have to pay a little bit more in taxes to make sure that people have access to healthcare. And one of the reasons that the ACA repeal failed is because the ACA expanded access to healthcare for millions of people. Turns out, when these millions of people get access to healthcare that they didn't have before, they kind of like it. They kind of want to keep it. So that's why the repeal effort completely failed, because so many people out there who are going to be impacted by the repeal of the ACA came out and they fought for it. They fought for it using town halls. They protested. They sent letters. They pushed some of the more moderate GOP members into voting against removing the ACA. And now Hatch is admitting that he threw everything at repeal. The Republicans threw everything at the repeal, and they still lost. And now, essentially saying, I'm done. We shot our wad. Now it's time to just roll over and do something else. Sad. Okay. All right. Now to go after the Democrats a little bit, or at least one. Let's talk about Joe Manchin. Oh boy. Now, Senator Joe Manchin is a corporate Democrat who serves the establishment and giant corporations. And he's not shy about who he works for. Now, he recently attacked some of his colleagues, Democratic colleagues, who want him to fully commit to Democratic policy. More specifically, things like not cutting taxes for corporations for the wealthy. There was this letter that came around where a lot of Democrats signed on to saying, we are not going to do tax reform. We're not going to sign on to tax reform with the Republicans that cuts corporate taxes, that cuts taxes for the wealthy. In fact, he recently told the Charleston Gazette Mail, he said, I don't give a shit. You understand? I don't give a shit. Don't care if I get elected. Don't care if I get defeated. How about that? Cash me outside. If they think I'm up for re-election, or if they think because I'm up for election that I can be wrangled into voting for shit that I don't like and can't explain, they're all crazy. Now, hold on. Hey, man, look, we got a badass over here. I'm just saying. Look, hey, if you don't care, wonderful. Then that means you're really not going to be pushing hard for re-election now, are you? You've got a primary coming up, and I can't wait. There's more. He said of that, I'm not scared of an election. Let's put it that way. Elections do not bother me or scare me. I'm going to continue to do the same thing I've always done. Extremely independent, except for all the money you take from fossil fuel companies. Just saying. Now, Manchin's comments were in response to an attack on him from GOP senatorial candidate Patrick Morrisey. Now, he's called for Manchin to resign from Democratic leadership and accused him of not fully representing his constituents' interests. Now, look, tell me, quick question. Do politicians represent their constituents? Do most of them? I would argue no. Because right now they're too busy pleasing the donors. In order to get their campaign contributions, they need to run for office. And so but that's a systemic problem, okay? Now, I'm sure some of the politicians, of course, would like to end that system that's got them dialing for dollars for sometimes up to 6 hours a day. But anyway, Morrissey specifically noted Manchin's refusal to sign a letter establishing Democrats' three main policy points on tax reform. Manchin was one of the three Senate Democrats who did not sign the letter, saying that he agreed with everything in the platform, but that he wanted party leaders to try and bring Republicans on board with the plan. Now, look, my personal opinion is, right now, I'm against working with Republicans on any kind of tax reform. Now, that letter said, well, we're not going to approve anything that gives tax cuts for rich people. But wait, You ask, well, why don't you support that? Isn't that good? Shouldn't you work with them? Because as long as it doesn't cut taxes for the rich, I thought you were in favor of not cutting taxes for the rich. Well, look, what I said over and over again is that tax reform is another word for corporate tax cuts. What I'm afraid of is I don't trust the Democrats to adhere to any sort of promise, especially when working with the Republicans. The Republicans, look, for all the criticisms I have of the Republican Party, thing that they have an advantage is that they are strong. They are strong, and they happen to use that strength to club Democrats over the head. The Democrats are way too conciliatory, and they bend over backwards way too much to the Republicans. That, to me, is a major, major problem. And look, I know how these deals go, right? Republicans, they want to cut taxes for the corporations and the rich. And they're like, that's our position. We're not going to come to you. You're going to come to us. And what's interesting is that cutting taxes for rich people is super unpopular. At least among non-rich people. Among rich people, obviously super popular. And that's, of course, unfortunately, who funds both parties. So I see the Democrats saying, well, okay, look, we'll help you cut taxes for the rich as long as you have a tax cut in there for middle class people. Or maybe, hey, how about for in exchange for tax cut for the rich, we slightly increase some entitlement spending, maybe a little bit. Who knows, right? Look, I'm scared how any of these deals would turn out because, again, the Democrats have shown that they're incredibly weak when it comes to negotiation. I like the spirit of the letter. I just don't trust the Democrats to actually stand up for their own principles. Because I don't think they have any principles at this point. Not the Democratic Party. Individual Democrats do, obviously. But again, there's so many people that I don't trust to adhere to those principles. But, and as far as Manchin, again, he didn't sign because he knew. He's like, no, of course I'm not going to agree to that. Because I'm fine with cutting taxes for corporations. I don't trust Manchin to do the right thing. I don't think anybody else does either. As for what he's saying about elections and primaries, you know what? Great. More Democrats should embrace primaries. Because let's face it, more are coming whether you like it or not. So when it comes to Manchin, let's have the voters decide whether or not they still want you in office. And well, basically, let's bring it on. Let's see it. Okay. I'm going to take one more break here. So make sure to tweet me, hashtag TYTNation, as well as use the super chat in order to get your comments. And of course, I will read it on the air. So we'll be right back. We'll see you in a minute. All right, back in Round the Nation here. Got a couple hashtag TYT Nations here. Nick D'Agostino tweets in, Trump, obviously a disaster, but I feel Pence would be worse because he can get things done. I agree with that point. I believe I've made that point before. And that's why I'm a little hesitant on the impeachment question. Because at the same time, it's like, yeah, Trump's a criminal, or seems like a criminal. That has to be proven. But the good thing about it is that he's incredibly inept and he's incredibly incompetent. Whereas somebody like Mike Pence is actually competent and actually incredibly dangerous. So, no, I totally understand that. Now, he said, thoughts on best case for Trump's term length. Best case would be 4 years of... So, okay. So this is getting into some possibilities. And look, I don't know if this is going to happen, so take it with a grain of salt. But if the Democrats can manage to take the Senate and do very well in the House, well, then there goes Trump's agenda. It's essentially shot. So we're not going to see like massive immigration reform like he wants. We might still see some tax cuts for the rich. That's unfortunate. But again, I don't trust the Democrats to not serve their donors in some capacity, as we've seen before. But most of Trump's agenda, the worst parts of it, will be largely stopped. Now, if the Democrats cannot take this House and the Senate, and they actually do worse, which is always a possibility, although not quite as likely as the Democrats taking over the House and Senate, or taking over the Senate at least, the House is going to be really, really impossible, almost impossible to do. It's going to be very, very difficult. So I don't see that likely happening. But the Senate, that's a different question. And it's possible that they could get at least enough for a filibuster-proof majority. Or not, I'm sorry. They could get enough to have a simple majority, I would say, in the Senate. So that would be enough to stop Trump's agenda. So that's what I see for the best case scenario for Trump's term, is that the Democrats get enough to basically stonewall and block his agenda for the next 4 years so that he doesn't get anything done and he gets kicked out. That's the best case scenario. Now, Dread at CP asks, how would you answer the tax question from the Shapiro-Cenk debate? I'm unaware of the question, so I don't remember the tax question. So unfortunately, okay, here it is. He says, Ben asked what Cenk would set the tax rate explicitly to pay for stuff. I don't know of the explicit rate. I believe we would have to play around with certain things. I would certainly go for no loopholes and a progressive taxation system, which of course does marginal rates. For example, if you're making over $10 million a year, maybe set a rate as high as 50% on anything over $10 million a year. I think that would be a more fair rate. But obviously, you'd have to look into setting up progressive rates. Lower for people who are in the lower income brackets, and the middle income, of course, not paying as much. And then I would go and tax capital gains at 30%. Would tax them at normal income. So maybe 39% for capital gains. So it's a very difficult question. It's a very nuanced question, and you would have to go through and you have to play with things. And basically play with the rate to see that it works. Now, that question, I think, is a gotcha question from Ben Shapiro because it asks for so many specifics, and it kind of gets you bogged down. So that's for something, but that's sort of what I would look at, is at least focusing on what the top marginal rates would be at the most highest, and then go through and work on the brackets from there. So hopefully that's a decent enough question. Hopefully I answered that so well enough. All right. Okay. That said, let's get into the last story. Let's talk about political correctness. Now, there's a new report out from The Guardian that shows that the Trump administration is now encouraging the use of political correctness when talking about climate change. Oh, that's very interesting. I thought they were against this whole political correctness thing. According to emails obtained by The Guardian, officials told staffers in the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service to change the way that they discuss climate change when it comes to their work. Now, let's give you some Orwellian examples of what they're changing it to. According to the office, climate change would, you couldn't say climate change anymore. It would become, quote, weather extremes. Oh, weather extremes. Oh, wonderful. Climate change adaptation should instead be named resilience to weather. Oh, hey, look at how resilient we are. Wonderful. That's a good connotation, right? And efforts to reduce greenhouse gases should instead be deemed as ways to build soil organic matter. And again, super, super Orwellian. And then increase nutrient use efficiency. See, what they're saying is that, well, there's no climate change. There's weather extremes. Florida, look, hey, Florida will be underwater by 2100. But don't worry, that's just the result of a weather extreme. And hey, the relocation effort for people that are fleeing a sunken Miami, well, don't worry, that's just considered resilient reaction to weather extremes. Now, of course, you have Bianca Mobius-Clune, the NRCS's director of soil health, writing to their staff in an email on February 16th, saying, don't worry, we won't change the modeling, just how we talk about it. Ah, wonderful. Now, Mobius-Clune said the new language was given to her to pass on to staff. So this is coming from the top, saying you must now say these things. These are the politically correct terms for climate change. You can't say that anymore. That is politically incorrect. This is basically saying, look, you can't say these things, talk about these phenomena, which are obviously real, in a way that looks bad to our ideology. It's got to look good on us politically. That's why we changed, climate change adaptation to resilience to weather. See, that's a good thing. It just shows how we're resilient to those weather extremes. It's ridiculous. And look, the whole reaction is, hey man, climate change sounds kind of bad. It's got a bad connotation. And a lot of people, the majority of the American people, are actually very concerned about climate change. We want to do something about climate change. So what we're going to do is that we're just going to change the language. We're going to change climate change to weather extremes. I mean, look, you can't fix extreme weather, right? So this is essentially the administration saying, we don't have to fix the problem when we can just, why fix the problem when all we have to do is just redefine it? Now, The Guardian also notes that it's not clear whether the NRCS's use of weather extremes instead of climate change is part of a broader shift within the USDA. An official said the directive was designed to allow the office to continue its climate change work while presenting it in a way that would better resonate with the new administration and the agricultural interests with which it works. Again, that's just saying we're being politically correct. When you have to change your term to better resonate with the new administration and its policy interests, well, that is literal political correctness. Again, I thought these Republicans made a big deal about being politically correct and how wrong it is to be politically. Oh man, the PC police. It's the PC police cracking down on us conservatives for their free speech. But now when we get into power, we're cracking down on your free speech and literally changing things to make the administration look better. More details. It has become clear, according to Jimmy Bramblett, the NRCS's Deputy Chief for Programs, writing in a January 24th email, quote, it has become clear one of the previous administration's priorities is not consistent with that of the incoming administration. Namely, that priority is climate change. Well, that's pretty evident. It's not only evident from choosing Scott Pruitt as head of the EPA. This is the guy that tried to sue the EPA on multiple instances. You also have Trump's outward denial of climate change, calling it a Chinese hoax. And of course, now you have this pick for the NRCS's department, the USDA's chief scientist, and that is a man named Sam Clovis. Now, the position, as I mentioned, is chief scientist. So prepare to not be shocked when I tell you that the guy who's supposed to lead the USDA as chief scientist is not even a scientist. He does not have a science degree. And of course, he is a rampant climate denier. And he claims that a lot of the science behind climate change is, quote, junk science. Well, I mean, your opinion carries a lot of weight, considering how you're not a climate scientist. You're not even a scientist at all. Now, here's another opinion by Clovis. He once said that progressives are, quote, liars, race traitors, and race traitors. So this is the guy that's now running the USDA. The position is supposed to be that of chief scientist. But he's not a scientist. Now, is it any wonder why this organization is now using politically correct language when it comes to facts about climate change? This isn't about facts. This isn't about anything like that. It's all about ideology. It's all about projection. This is what you have. And of course, it shows that when you give Republicans power, this is how they use it. To shut people down who don't agree with them. Okay. There's that. That's all the stories I have for you. I do want to answer one more tweet here. And read actually a couple of hashtag TYT Nations here. WDGAS might as well go with as a slogan with the Democrats, a better butt fuck. And that's from Fifi Ferengi. Raven asks, what are my thoughts on political correctness on both sides? Look, I actually am in favor of free speech. So I don't believe that you should shut anyone down, even if their speech is ridiculous. I think bad ideas and should be given a spotlight so that we can shut them down. And you shut them down with logic. You don't shut them down by saying you can't speak. You shut them down by presenting a good counter argument in order to make them look like idiots. That's my belief. And I think that both sides do shut down conversations. Both sides are guilty of that. And, look at what's happened on the left when it comes to progressives, for example. If you criticize Kamala Harris, for example, for, giving Steven Mnuchin, his bank, a pass, even though that there was substantial evidence against that. If you criticize Kamala Harris for that, or any part of her record, and you say, I don't think she's progressive enough, I'm not really in favor of her. Well, look at what some in the center left do. They call you a racist and a sexist and a misogynist. Okay? So, look, that's a good example of trying to shut down legitimate criticism with bullshit and identity politics. So that's what the left does, right? The right are also hypocrites when it comes to free speech because, again, once they get into power, they do everything they can to shut down liberal free speech and liberal free ideas. Big problem, okay? So I think both sides are rather hypocritical when it comes to the idea of free speech. But then both sides do actually also make good arguments for free speech. So again, there's my position on that. I'm free speech. I believe that you should not shut down other people in their opinions. I had a big problem with, of course, some of the riots that have happened on campus, chasing some conservatives out. I believe conservatives should be able to speak, and if you have a problem with it, you should be able to protest, but not literally pull fire alarms and stuff like that. So, but that's my thought on free speech. It's a good question. Free speech and political correctness. And again, I'm not in favor of that either. But it also depends on what you define as political correctness. Because there are some things like not saying the N-word, right? Now, some conservatives might be like, but I want to say the N-word, and your political correctness is stopping me from doing that. Well, no, that's actually just not being a dick. You shouldn't say that because, again, number one, that's a dick-headed thing to do. Number two, you're probably going to get punched in the face. So, and I'm not advocating for violence or anything like that, but that's likely what will happen. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for the questions, for using the hashtag TYTNation. Don't forget, you can also use the super chat. I definitely suggest using that if you have a comment during the show and you want me to read it on the YouTube comments. Please leave me a super chat, and I'll definitely read that. All right. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. We'll see you guys tomorrow right here, TYT Nation. Make sure to like and subscribe the channel if you haven't already. And become a patron if you want to support the show. Patreon.com/TYTNation. All right, everybody. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Also, money is not speech.